Welcome to this series, part 4 of European Union Artificial Intelligence Act. We have covered three areas. So, in summary, we have covered introduction, background and legislative journey, trigger for creating EU AI Act, case study for those triggers, key objectives and features of the AI Act, scope and applicability, impact and significance. This was in part 1. In part 2, we have covered risk based classifications of AI system. We have looked at different systems, definition of unacceptable risk and what it means. We also understood that the act is in play. We also understood the prohibited AI system, what it means as per chapter 2, article 5. We understood the case studies so that the context is clear as we move forward. That was part 2. In part 3, we looked at high risk AI system as listed in chapter 3, article 6. We have looked at case studies that illustrates high risk AI systems, what it actually means on the ground. That should help you with the context for your own reference for your estate and the businesses that you are in. We understood what is risk-based classifications of AI system, how that works, how it looks like. And finally, we ended up part 3 with the role of the European Commission. So let's move forward to part 4 of this series. We will focus on high risk AI system, chapter 3, article 8 to 17. Let us look at the requirement of high risk AI system as per chapter 3, article 8 to 17. As per this chapter and the article, a high risk AI provider is actually the provider, the team, the organization, or an individual who is providing the AI system, the designer or the creator. So, a high risk AI provider must establish a risk management system throughout the high risk AI system's life cycle. Now, the word here important to focus is life cycle, which means the moment this product is in play or in production, till this system is taken out permanently, you need to have a risk management system to support that system. This is the AI system. It's mandatory for the provider. So anyone who is a developer, who is a service provider of AI systems and it is categorized as high risk, you need to factor in, plan it, how that would be done. It's a process in itself. The second, they have to conduct data governance, ensuring that training, validation, and testing data sheets are relevant, sufficiently representative, and to the best extent possible free of errors and complete according to the intended purpose. Now, do note this is not a one time activity. When you launch it, you would have to provide all of these. Now, that could be easier said than done since after launching you might have an upgrade, an update, a patch, or a change, look and feel. Every time you do it, you need to ensure that the training, the testing data sheet, all of these need to be updated and available. And the onus is on the provider that all of these should be error free and complete according to the intended purpose. So that need to be factored in for all the providers of the services. They need to draw up technical documentation to demonstrate compliance and provide authorities with the information to assess the compliance. Again, important when you are launching, but also important every time there is a query from authorities. You would need to provide these. If there has been any changes, no matter how minor it is, those need to get reflected in the documentation. The next is You need to design the high risk AI system for record keeping to enable it to automatically record events relevant for identifying any national level risk and substantial modification throughout the system's life cycle. Any provider who is providing these services, you just can't launch, go into production, and then close the shop and move out. That's a very high risk. Now, if you are an organization who has taken services of the provider, a provider has given you the AI system, developed the AI system, and you are an organization which is using that, and you're using it on your customers. For the customer, it is you who are providing it. You might have internally taken it from a different developer, an organization, but you are held accountable. Hence, before onboarding an AI system, which is high risk, you need to ensure that your systems are in line with the requirements from a regulator perspective, because the regulator will come to you asking for it. They might also go to the provider for sure, because the provider might have given it to others, or you might be the only one. But if the provider has vanished after the release, you are held accountable because you are the one who are catering to the client, the EU client. So you have to think through about how your engagement is with the provider. Of course, if you are the provider itself, you are the one who are developing, then the onus is completely on you to ensure you have kept everything in play. So think through about it, strategize your plan. In addition, the provider needs to provide instruction for use to the downstream developer to enable the latest compliance, which we discussed just before. How will the deployer enable compliance? The instruction should be very clear. Now, if you are a consumer, you are a company or an organization which is taking the AI system from someone else, as part of onboarding that AI system into your process, you need to ensure that you have an instruction for use, very clearly documented, vetted out, and you understand how things are. Don't expect a positive response from the regulator if they come and ask you about it and you point it to a provider, and it won't be entertained. That's, I think, from the tone of the act looks like. You would be expected to know what you have signed up for. You are the one who onboarded that AI system into your process. Hence, the buck stops at you. The provider need to design their high risk AI system to allow deployers to implement human oversight. What it means is, if you are a developer, your process can't be fire and forget. There has to be a human intervention where the final decision is taken, or there is a oversight on how the whole thing is working. But if you are an organization which has taken the services from a provider, you would need to have a mechanism inbuilt into the system that you know exactly what's happening at any given point of time in the processing, and you have a say. If the developed system causes any non compliance, losses, or breaches a law, or breaches the act in any form and shape, you don't have a recourse here stating it's not me, it's the tool. Hence, you need to have a solid grip on the system that you are procuring. So you need to be mindful of it. The developer need to design their high risk AI system to achieve a appropriate level of accuracy, robustness, and cyber security. I think pretty straightforward. For the organization which is procuring it to provide services to its customer, you need to ensure that these are in place. And for a regulator, you are the one, you are the developer. You can't point it to a developer somewhere else, because you are the one who has taken that AI system to cater to your client. And from a client perspective, you are the developer. The developers need to establish a quality management system to ensure compliance. Similarly, the organization procuring the AI system need to have that in place. So the responsibility is equal for both the developer and the organization which is using the services. So that need to be clear. It can't be a case where you as an organization pointing it to a developer. That won't fly. You just need to be hyper alert on this aspect. Now let's look at the general purpose AI or GPAI as defined in chapter 5. General purpose AI. This category encompasses AI models with a wide range of applications, including foundational models like ChatGPT. At this point of time, let us assume ChatGPT as the reference. It's a general purpose AI, and most of you are already hands on to it. The provider of GPAI systems are required to ensure transparency, which means disclose information about the training data and capabilities of the AI model. Should be able to address potential risk associated with the deployment of the AI system. Should be able to ensure that the use of training data adheres to the intellectual property rights. Now, it sounds similar to what we discussed earlier on high risk. For GPAI also, similar things need to be in place, if not all. We'll come to those exceptions, but at this point of time, the requirement for GPAI and the high risk are identical, and we discussed those requirement on transparency, risk, and the relevance of and the accuracy of the training data. Of course, in the GPAI, the intellectual property rights need to be adhered to. Is something which you can see now when you type a query or ask for information on a particular topic. Generally, the output has a reference to from where it has come from. So, with the newer upgraded ones. So, that's the copyright law. High impact GPAI systems, particularly those with significant computational capability, may be subjected to additional evaluation to assess systemic risk. Now, this is interesting because the first time a computational capability is used in a statement. Why is this? What is this? We will go into the details next. GPAI model means an AI model including when trained with a large amount of data using self supervision at scale that displays significant generalities and is capable to competently perform a wide range of distinct tasks regardless of the way the model is placed on the market, and that can be integrated into a variety of downstream system or application. That's the definition. This does not cover AI models that are used before release on the market for research, development, and prototyping activity. So be very clear, a GPI PAI is, as per chapter 5, is the one which is already in use. Those which are under test, development, working as a prototype is not under the scope of chapter 5. GPAI system means an AI system which is based on general purpose AI model that has the capability to serve a variety of purpose, both for direct use as well as for integration in other AI systems. Now do note, it could be a GPAI model as per chapter 5, but it can be used to integrate with a high risk one. Now that's going to be interesting because when we have GPAI, the general purpose, it would have a control which is at less stringent, whereas it is feeding into a system of high risk. Think through what would be the combination of risk, what would be the end state of the risk, how would that position itself. We'll discuss that as we move forward. Now for this conversation, GPI system may be used for high risk AI system or integrate into them. In that case, the GPI system should cooperate with such high risk AI system provider to enable latest compliance, which means if the GPAI system is integrated with a AI system which is already categorized as high risk, the organization where this is happening need to ensure that the GPAI system provides the support, the service, the tweaking if required to, so as to ensure that the high risk AI system remains compliant. So a scenario here is you are having a high risk system wherein you have ensured compliance in every form and shape up to the last word, and now we have, for some valid reason, want to have a feed from a GPAI, say ChatGPT, but by integrating it, there is a situation created wherein your high risk system deviates from full compliance. In such case, you are at risk because though your system in itself is compliant, but the moment it gets integrated, there is a certain level of non-compliance creeping in. In such cases, you would need to engage with the respective GPI provider, ask for a tweaking or work out a model where your high risk system compliance is not compromised. Do note, your system is getting compromised, which means your services to your stakeholders is compromised. The regulator will ask you for a cause and ask you to be in compliance. You would be penalized if you are not the upstream, because you are the one who engaged it. It's not the regulator asking you to engage with them. You decided. So when you decide this type of an integration, you have to be mindful, hypersensitive about your own AI's compliance level. Let us now look at some general purpose AI case studies. Case studies on risk associated with general purpose AI as contextualized within Chapter 5 of the EU AI Act, which specifically governs GPAI model. These case studies are illustrative based on the risk the EU AI Act seeks to address, including systemic risk, information integrity, misuse, and lack of transparency. The first case study here is related to disinformation campaign using a GPAI model. A powerful GPAI model similar to GPT based architecture was used to generate large volume of realistic disinformation content during an election period in European country. The risk here was information integrity and democracy risk, systemic risk to public trust. What happened? The model was used to auto-generate thousands of false news stories and social media posts. These were then spread across network to influence public opinion. The source of the content was obscured. From a EU Act perspective, the provider failed to meet transparency obligation, Article 52. No risk management or monitoring framework was in place to detect or mitigate misuse. The GPI provider did not share the required documentation or safeguards with the deployers. Case 2, biases in GPAI based resume screening. A general purpose AI model was used by a recruitment platform to screen resumes before presenting them to hiring managers. The risk in this case was bias and related to discrimination. It also had lack of transparency and explainability. The GPAI model exhibited biases against certain ethnic names and educational backgrounds. The deployer had minimal insight into the model's logic due to lack of transparency documentation. The affected individuals raised legal and ethical concerns. The GPAI provider did not provide sufficient technical documentation, training data sheet, or impact assessments. The model was not evaluated for systemic risk or downstream use impact, thus violating Article 51 and 55. Case 3, code generation GPAI used for malware creation. A GPI system capable of code generation was used to create sophisticated malware by users with malicious intent. The risk in this case was dual use, cybersecurity threats. The model generated polymorphic malware code. The ease of access and poor use restriction enabled cyber criminals to exploit the system, resulted in several ransomware attacks across critical European infrastructure. Hence, this violated Article 52(1) and D on the preventive misuse, inadequate safeguard or monitoring mechanism to detect malicious usage. The provider did not adhere to risk management framework or red teaming obligations under Article 55. Do note, as you read the cases, you understand the risk, you understand what really happened, and how that is linked to the act. You get the story now on what we have studied or understood before the case studies. The whole idea behind case studies is to complete the picture with what is written in theory, which is the definition and articulation of the law and the act, and with the actual context on the ground when these are in play. So, hence, these case studies form a critical base to understand the full context of the story. The next case study is related to GPAI model producing harmful health advice. The context: a chatbot powered by a general purpose AI model provided incorrect medical guidance to users on social media platforms. The risk here is public health and safety risk. It's also about misinformation on high stake domains. The AI generated advice contradicted standard clinical guidelines. In this case, several users followed this harmful recommendation. The deployers were not informed that the model has not been validated for medical use. Hence, the model's provider did not clearly specify intended versus non intended use. It lacked labeling and transparency obligation as per Article 52 and hence led to downstream misuse. Article 54, compliance on documentation and usage boundaries were violated. The next case is on inadequate red teaming in a GPAI leading to offensive content. The context is a language generating a GPAI released an open access was inadequately tested and produced racist, sexist, and xenophobic content in response to users' prompt. The risk here is ethical harm and social trust erosion, lack of risk mitigation in the model deployment. What happened? Researchers showed that the model frequently reflected harmful biases present in the training data. The provider had not performed rigorous adversarial testing, which is known as the red teaming. Public backlash led to reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny. Hence, this was a breach of Article 55 on model evaluation and testing. No public transparency report was available, violated Article 52. Failure to apply the code of conduct and voluntary commitment under Article 56. This gives all a perspective about what can go wrong and how a violation is mapped, which can lead to severe penalties. This is something which the organizations implementing AI systems need to be aware and factor in. Hence, in summary, the systemic risk invokes Article 51-55. It's about large scale impact due to scale and general purpose nature. The misuse potential hits 52 and 55. Use in generating malware, disinformation, etc. Transparency failures hits Article 52-54, leading to it is about the lack of documentation, disclosure, and traceability. The bias and discrimination hits the inadequate training data vetting and fairness check, hence Article 55-56. Safety and ethical harm hitting Article 51-52, which is about harmful output in health, law, or social domain. Do note all of these examples, references to article, the description are to be used in your own analysis in your context. This video is more of to make people aware, teams aware, risk teams, audit teams, governance teams, controls teams, general management, or teams managing regulators on your own individual environment, its case studies, and its mapping. This video and everything that has been said here is for reference. You can refer, get an idea, put that into your perspective in your context and see the relevance. And of course, always vet against the official document of EU AI Act, which is available. So you have the current and the latest one. So hope this helps you in your AI cases. All providers of GPI model must draw up the technical documentation, including training and testing process and evaluation results. This is as per Article 53 of Chapter 5. They should be able to draw up information and documentation to supply to downstream provider that intend to integrate the GPI model into their own AI systems in order that the latter understands the capability and limitations and is enabled to comply. We discussed this earlier. The provider of GPI model should establish a policy to respect the copyright directive. We gave a small example on this. They should be able to publish a sufficiently detailed summary about the content used for training the GPI model. Now do note I have highlighted 4 aspects: technical documentation, information and documentation to supply to downstream provider. Third, respect the copyright directive. Fourth, sufficiently detailed summary about the content used for training the GPI. Now do remember this, and we'll go for the next section where we'll understand why I highlighted this 4. Free and open license GPI model whose parameters including weight, model architecture, model usage are publicly available, allowing for access, usage, modification, and distribution of model, only have to comply with the later two obligations as mentioned earlier. What are the later two? As mentioned earlier, later two is respect the copyright directive and sufficiently detailed summary about the content used for training the GPI. So hence, free and open license GPI are required to be complying with those two, unless the free and open license GPI model is systemic. Now, what's systemic? We discussed this, but then one of the interesting thing which I highlighted, we'll come back on the computing power. A GPI models are considered systemic when the cumulative amount of compute used for its training is greater than 10 to the power 25 floating points operations per second, which is also called as flops. Just digest this. Think through where in any of the act earlier, in any combination of any act that you have seen, a computing power has been used in an act. This is a game changer in a law, at least from an AI perspective, because that's how AI is perceived. Provider must notify the commission if their model meets this criteria within 2 weeks. The provider must present arguments that despite meeting the criteria, their model does not present a systemic risk. The commission may decide on its own or via a qualified alert from the scientific panel of independent experts that a model has high impact capability, rendering it systemic. Now again, why does an act has a reference to the cumulative compute power? To understand the context of 10 to the power 25 floating, we'll just digress a little bit off track, but might help us to understand. A simple interpretation of 10 to the power 25 flops means a computer system can perform 10 septillion mathematical calculations per second. In comparison to the human brain is estimated to perform for about 10 to the power 16 operations per second. So, a 10 to the power 25 flop is roughly a billion times faster than the human brain in raw calculation speed. In comparison to a supercomputer, the fastest supercomputer today as on 2025 operates in the exascale range around 10 to the power 18 flops. So, a 20 to power 25 flop is 10 million times faster than the fastest supercomputer available now. What you could do in 1 second with 10 to the power 25? Simulate the weather globally down to the resolution of every blade of glass. Translate every book ever written into every language instantly. Train the world's largest AI model in milliseconds. Why it matters in GPAI or in AI context? At 10 to the power 25 flop, an AI model could process vast amount of data in real time, enable near perfect simulation, prediction, or even AGI level reasoning, pose systemic risk, which is why such capabilities are monitored under the regulation like the EU AI Act. I hope this context helps in understanding why this was mentioned in Article 51 of Chapter 5 of EU AI Act. In addition to the 4 obligations mentioned earlier, providers of GPI models with systemic risk must also perform model evaluation, including conducting and documenting adversarial testing to identify and mitigate systemic risk. They should assess and mitigate possible systemic risk, including their sources. They are expected to track, document, and report serious incidents and possible corrective measures to the AI office and relevant national competent authority without undue delay. They are expected to ensure an adequate level of cybersecurity protection. All GPAI model providers must demonstrate compliance with their obligations if they voluntarily adhere to the code of practice until European harmonizes standards are published. Compliance with which will lead to a presumption of conformity as per Article 56. Providers that don't adhere to code of practice must demonstrate alternative adequate means of compliance for Commission's approval. With this, we have reached the end of part 4. We have covered High Risk AI System Chapter 3, Article 8 to 17 in part 4. Other than that, we have covered the GPAI Chapter 5. We have looked at case studies for GPAI so that the picture is clearer. We understand the context, we understand the rationale why there is articulation of certain statements and definitions in the Act. We also looked at GPAI Chapter 5, Article 51, 52, 53. We have understood the context with some examples. And we have specifically picked up why compute power is referenced in the Act. We have provided a context as to why it is so. A very interesting aspect in an Act. So this ends our part 4. We have one more session to continue. But respecting the depth of the Act, the interpretation is critical for us to understand before we jump into implementation. And those teams, those organizations which has already implemented, they can reference this and fine tune it if there are certain things which might help them. So I'd like to thank you again for staying with me till now, and let's dive into the last part, potentially part 5. This is your host Savit Vittal Salian. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.